Well, there's no doubt that on a level playing field where the ideas of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, our founders, common sense, when it's given a level playing field, we win every time. It's like, last year's Super Bowl team playing a group of 5-year-old peewee, football players. And that's why Obama is openly coming out, the FCC, the Federal Trade Commission. I mean, this isn't just on Freedom Watch or Infowars.com now, ladies and gentlemen. It's now in the AP, in the Financial Times of London. Obama to have kill switch. Government to have black box in-house that watches everything you do and filters what you can see. Government to have megaphone. Government to have behavior placement. I mean, this is bona fide tyranny.
This is proposed by the Republicans' favorite Democrat, Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, under the guise of, well, if we are attacked, if the power grid is attacked, if the Internet is attacked, the president has to have the power to turn it off before the attackers can get...
the power grid's not hooked up to the Internet.
Precisely. There's so much illogic in there, but put aside the illogic. What about the Constitution? What about if I want my laptop turned off, I'll turn it off? What about the fact that the laptop is just a modern way to exercise my freedom of speech? And the whole purpose of the First Amendment, according to Justice William Brennan, one of the most liberal appointees of the 20th century, is to keep the government out of the business of deciding what I read and what I watch and what I hear, and presumes that the individual is competent to decide what to read, watch, hear, and say. There is absolutely no authority under the Constitution, whether under the guise of public safety or not, and the government has always used public safety as the excuse to steal our liberties, for the government to control the Internet. Oh, how the government would love to have the power over the Internet that the Chinese government has over the Internet there. The Internet has been the greatest tool of the exchange of ideas and of the search for truth since the invention of the printing press. They can't control the printing press, so they want to control the Internet.
And expanding on that, they know they can't compete with our ideas. That's why Cass Sunstein, the regulations are. That's why the FCC's diversities are. Praises censorship of Hugo Chavez. I mean, I think Americans need to realize that we're dealing with bona fide despots and tyrants here. And we see Obama, as bad as Bush was, as bad as Clinton was, it's just a progression. But now, because there's a huge awakening happening, they are accelerating their takeover. And we see him federalizing the auto industry, federalizing the banks. We see him now, according to 8 senators and Fox News and others are reporting that Obama plans to sign an executive order legalizing all the illegal aliens. For those that aren't a constitutional lawyer like yourself or a former top state judge, Judge Andrew Napolitano, will you explain to them, because for my layman research, the president executes law and the legislative passes it. That is treason. That is a act of sedition against our republic, to have the president say that I'm going to launch a war without Congress's approval. I'm going to legalize foreigners. I mean, can you speak to that?
Sure, I can speak to it. The president has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws. When the president does things like intimidate the bondholders of GM and Chrysler during their bankruptcies to break the law, intimidate the banks to accept TARP monies that they don't want, intimidate BP to cough up a $20 billion slush fund that his political appointee can distribute however he wants, intimidate insurance company executives not to raise premiums until the law that prohibits the raise comes into effect. He is effectively writing laws himself. That is, on its face, unconstitutional, because the Constitution says only the Congress can write laws and not the president. The flip side of this is when he says, and we haven't heard this out of his mouth, but we've heard it from people around him, and they're not denying it, which is why Fox and other outlets are reporting it. He is considering a blanket amnesty of all illegals in the country. The last time we had an amnesty was in the Reagan administration. It was done by the Congress. Only the Congress can do this by changing the law. Does the Congress have the power to change the law? Yes. Does the president have the power to change the law? No. So what could he do? Well, he could, with the stroke of a pen, stop all arrests and stop all deportations. Now, that would have the practical effect of saying to illegals, you can stay here. The legal effect of that, however, is to frustrate federal law, which says that illegals are not supposed to stay here, or they're supposed to go through the process of becoming legal, and effectively is the opposite.
And so he's aiding and abetting lawbreakers because he's violating the law that the Congress has passed.
Correct.
And so isn't that treason?
No, it's not treason under the Constitution, but it is such an egregious failure to perform his duties that, in my opinion, it would be an impeachable offense. I mean, which is worse, for Bill Clinton to lie under oath about sex with an intern, or for Barack Obama to admit openly, I don't like those laws, so I'm not going to enforce them? Now, a lot of presidents have done that. George Bush once signed a law making it a crime for federal agents to read your mail before you do without a search warrant. At the very moment that he signed the law, he looked in the cameras and said, I have no intention of enforcing this. Now, at that point, he's violating his oath because he took an oath to uphold the law. President Obama, if he does this nonsense, this monstrosity of trying to grant amnesty to everybody that is here, will effectively be doing the same thing. I would argue that the violation of the oath, the public acknowledgement of the failure to perform his job as president, is far more a grounds for impeachment than what Clinton said he did with the intern under oath.
Very well said. I would imagine you're aware of this case, but it's been in the Salt Lake City papers. Nat Hentoff has written about it for the Reading Eagle. Philadelphia man indicted for using right to free speech. And I saw this a few months ago, but now they're going ahead with the 3 felonies. And the part he's been charged for, he was watching an unemployment debate about getting rid of his benefits. And his quote is that, "Are you crazy? Are you all insane? No checks equals no food for me. Do you get it?" And he sent it as an email. And under the Telecommunications Act of 1996, under Section 1934, he did utilize a telecommunications device whether or not communication ensued without disclosing his identity, it was his email, and with the intent to annoy, abuse, threaten, and harass any person who received the communication. And it says he would serve the 3 counts concurrently, as much as 30 years federally in prison for calling the senator insane.
I would think that a federal judge would not permit such a prosecution. I'm convinced absolutely that the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal appeals court that covers Pennsylvania, would invalidate it. That court particularly has a tradition of being very pro-individual against the government when it comes to expressive liberty.
Sure, but what does this say about the mindset of the people that are in these federal positions, these federal prosecutors? I mean, now, that's an example of how they can pass a law and then not use it till 14 years later. It's
right. Well, the law is unconstitutionally vague, and quite frankly, Alex, there are Supreme Court opinions that say the Congress cannot stop you from annoying or offensive speech because the First Amendment protects annoying or offensive speech. And the Supreme Court, for all of the wacky things that it's done, it allowed slavery, it allowed abortion, it allows prosecutions of crimes that shouldn't exist. Today, by a 9-0 vote, gave federal prosecutors the greatest rebuke that they have ever had in modern times when it found unconstitutional their favorite tool, their favorite weapon, which is the Honest Services Law. That law allowed federal prosecutors to prosecute even people who did the right thing if they harbored in their mind a desire to benefit from it themselves. The mayor of Newark, New Jersey, went to jail because he had sex with a real estate agent that the city hired to sell city property. Did she sell the city property at market rates? Yes. Did the city lose a nickel? Yes. But because the mayor had sex with her, he was convicted by a federal prosecutor who's now the governor of New Jersey and by a federal jury in Newark for violating the Honest Services Law. He was more interested in sex than he was in a professional relationship.
Well, that's a thought crime. I mean, that's controlling who we can associate with?
The Supreme Court today, with everybody from Ruth Bader Ginsburg to Antonin Scalia and the other 7 in between agreeing, invalidated that and said to the feds, you cannot use language creatively to prosecute people. You must use statutory language narrowly. Now, at the risk of getting too into the weeds, I make this argument for you, Alex, because I am convinced that this prosecution, about which you have rightly complained and which you have wonderfully exposed in Philadelphia, ought never to occur, and if it does occur, will be thrown out at the appellate level, especially after this case came down today. But we should not even have people in a position of power, in a position to decide who gets indicted and who gets prosecuted, who have a mindset that they can use the power of the government to punish speech. Because if anything is sacrosanct in this country, is that you can say anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want about anybody in the government.
Well, that's